There is this expression, unhinged. As we know, a hinge is what attaches a door to the wall. And if something is taken off of its hinges, then the barrier between you and whatever's on the other side of the wall, or the other side of the door, is dropped. And so in many ways we can consider that the mind is the hinge, and that is the colloquial expression. Being unhinged means kind of out of your mind. But what does the hinge really represent in relationship to the mind and in relationship to thought? What I would submit to you is that the other side of the door is the formless, is the infinite, is that which is beyond the mind's comprehension. And attempts to comprehend or ignore that greater reality is what leads us to have a very tight hinge or to become sort of unhinged in a sense of being uncomfortable. Let's talk about the hinged, being hinged. So when you're hinged, your mind and your focus and your attention is all about some fear, anger, or desire. It could be resentment, could be jealousy, some kind of dissatisfaction, or some kind of satisfaction you have, but then a need to defend that. And that is what we spend most of our lives in a state of. In the case of executive function disorder, we can get so focused on the hinge, and a certain rigidity can result, where we get very attached to results. With dementia, we can begin to forget. We can begin to forget what it is we were doing, who a particular person is, and what tends to happen is, because of a habit, a lifetime habit of needing that hinge, that ability to either distract ourselves from the infinite or to somehow comprehend the infinite, leads the patient with dementia to become upset, right? They're upset because their hinge isn't keeping the barrier between the formless, the emptiness, the stillness, the silence, the infinite, and the world they have known. And that is why Campbell's 17 steps is so important. So this is where we enter the cave, where the hinges begin to come a little loose, and how we respond to those initial loosenings, those initial moments of forgetting, in my premise, will impact the speed at which the symptoms of dementia arise, and the severity, and the level of upset that happens in them. And this is not just me having conjecture. We can see this from research studies. They did a research study on women and neurotic behavior, anxiety, etc. And if they had a higher level, then their dementia, this is a long-term study, their dementia came on sooner. And they're scratching their heads, they don't really understand why, and I think I do know why, which is basically it's all about equanimity and acceptance of the law of impermanence. And if you have neurotic thoughts and behavior and anxiety, then you are rejecting the law of impermanence. You're trying to hold on to the hinges. You're trying to keep the door between the infinite, the formless, the emptiness, the stillness, the silence, and where you are today. This material world, this world of wants and fears, anxieties and jealousy and greed and insecurity and all that. And so what we can do is we transmute the fear of dementia, the fear of passing through that doorway, and this can also be the fear of death, into our spiritual practice. We look at each time the mind is trying to say, oh, well, this will solve the problem, or this is the reason there is a problem, right? That's the hinge. Every time we see that, we say, okay, but what's behind that? What's beyond this door that the mind is so focused on? And you think about it, there's so many ways of describing this. One of the common ways is the realm of sensory input. When we experience the world, we're only experiencing a very small band of the electromagnetic spectrum, right? We only see visible light. We're not seeing X-rays, we're not seeing ultraviolet, we're not seeing infrared, we're not seeing microwaves, but all that's there. And so my point is simply that if we're so focused on the hinge, if we're so focused on what we fear and what we desire, then we are blocking ourselves from the infinite because we're focused on the finite. We're blocking ourselves from the formless because we're focused on forms. And so what the opportunity is, if there's a fear of dementia or even initial signs of dementia, is to begin to recontextualize what being hinged meant. You know, our society says being hinged, although they don't use that word, but that being hinged is how you get what you want and how you avoid the stuff you don't want. Technically, temporarily, true, but because that act is in contrast or in contradiction to the law of impermanence, it ultimately brings suffering because you have attachment to being hinged. You have attachment to avoiding what you fear or dislike, and you have attachment to getting what you desire and want. But the way through this, a visual image that you can use is the hinge. Is saying, oh, okay, I see what's going on here. The mind, once again, is trying to create a hinge. It's trying to create a way to block out the infinite, the other bands of the spectrum, or the other aspects of life, or that which is beyond finiteness, beyond time, because it can't comprehend that and can't conceptualize that. But you can loosen up yourself to find an experience of that. You can find that experience of the infinite, of the formless, in this moment by simply moving to awareness of awareness. And that's a big part of what meditation accomplishes. If you don't have equanimity, then you're focused on the hinge. You're focused on, how do I fix this? Or how do I avoid this? Or how do I conquer this? So each time you have anything that blocks equanimity, you remember the hinge. You have equanimity about the hinge. It's trying to keep you safe because it doesn't understand. The mind does not understand what is beyond the finite, beyond the forms. But then you say, but I want to see what's on the other side of the door. And then suddenly you have a different context for dementia.